Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Preston Dennett. Before I bring him on, I want to thank our sponsors. Right now, with everything happening, it wouldn't hurt to have an emergency food supply. Check out My Patriot Supply. They are the experts in emergency preparedness. Right now, you can get $70 off a 2-week food supply and $100 off a 4-week supply. Just go to preparewithfkn.com or click the link in the description. And I also want to thank C60 Purple Power. This amazing super antioxidant has me feeling better than I felt in years. C60 is a free radical sponge with an antioxidant efficiency several hundredfold higher than conventional antioxidants. Just click the link in the description or visit c60purplepower.com/knowledge10 or use coupon code knowledge10 and you'll get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Tonight, I want to welcome Preston Dennett. He began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 26 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, and his writing has been translated into several different languages, and he has appeared on numerous radio and television programs. His research has been presented in the LA Times, LA Daily News, Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. He is also an award-winning science fiction writer. Preston, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to it. I've been fascinated with ufology my entire life, hence, one of the reasons I started this show. And it wasn't until recently that I've had my first sighting, and then back-to-back I had an actual contact experience, which was very amazing for me because seeing as I've been skeptical, but still open-minded about the phenomenon. But having experienced it myself, it gives me a whole new outlook and insight into the phenomenon that I'm very extremely glad that it happened. But for you, let's start. What got you interested in this subject?
I hated it. I hated anything to do with UFOs. I really did. Just didn't believe in them. And I was pretty darn sure I was right because the stars are too far away. Scientifically speaking, I don't see how ETs could get here. That was just some false assumption. Turned out I was wrong. But I found out, I remember this exactly actually, it was 1986, November 15th or 17th, around there. And this guy comes on the news, Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, one of these main news guys, and starts talking about this pilot who saw a UFO. I'm like, oh yeah, right. This pilot is obviously crazy or he's hallucinating. But it interested me because it was they didn't take the sighting very seriously. They just kind of laughed about it on the news and moved on. I later found out there was radar returns, multiple witnesses. It followed their plane for like an hour. It had a course change. It still followed them. A great case, but none of that was in the news. And still it interested me enough to start asking people. And here's where I got the biggest shock, I think, one of my life, really, one of them, is my brother had seen a UFO, so had my sister-in-law, so had 2 people at work, several friends, and a couple of these people had missing time or saw gray aliens. I was angry. I felt scandalized. I'm like, what? You saw ET? I mean, these are people I loved and trusted. I thought I knew them. Man, oh man. So yeah, it was a difficult period of adjustment, finding out that this was real. I tried to disprove them. I couldn't. I went to the library. It's swamp gas. That's what it is. Man. So yeah, it took a year of literally just digging in. I ended up joining every UFO group. I started seriously interviewing people, recording interviews, because all my people that I was interviewing had other witnesses with them. My brother saw a UFO. He had 2 witnesses. Same with my sister-in-law. All these people had witnesses to support their case. So I'm like, all right, this is a real phenomena. The world's being invaded by aliens and almost nobody's talking about it. I still can't get over it.
So when did you start actually doing field investigations?
About, that was 1986. I'm going to say about 1988 is when I joined MUFON, took their field investigator test, which was a take-home test, by the way. I thought, this is going to be easy. Even though there really wasn't internet at the time, there was resources like libraries. It wasn't an easy test. It was, many questions. I forget how many, 100, 300, could have been more. But it was difficult. A lot of photography questions, a lot of meteorological questions, astronomy questions, of course, UFO history. But I did really well. I did really, really well, and I studied, and I joined MUFON. I joined all the UFO groups. I mean, I was going to go find out. I didn't stop there. I subscribed to all the magazines, anything I could find with the word UFO on it. I wanted a piece of it. And I asked everybody I knew. And that's soon started branching out to their friends. So I think the first person I actually interviewed was a friend of my father's who was a lieutenant colonel, Duncan Wilmore. And my father was working on the TV series Starman at the time. And this guy was a consultant. And this lieutenant colonel gives me this most ridiculous interview where he absolutely refused to even admit UFOs were real. It was pretty funny. But that was my first one. And yeah, I've been doing interviews since then. And I went out into the field. I mean, I was going to see this stuff for myself.
Now, have you ever had any personal sightings that you can, claim that probably aren't, any military, or it could possibly be off planet?
Yeah, I sure have, and more than one. And some are really good sightings. Honestly, the first one was at a UFO group down in Santa Monica here in Southern California. This guy was speaking, and he was a contactee. I think his name was Andy Rice, and he claimed to be in contact with ETs. And I thought, all right, let's listen to the guy. And he had an interesting story. And during the meeting, he's like, we'll try and call down UFOs after the meeting if anyone's interested. I'm like, heck yeah, you kidding? And so, there was a lot of people there, 50 maybe. And in the lecture afterwards, most everyone left. I'm like, what? Don't you want to see a UFO? So only really about maybe 10 or 15 of us stayed. And this guy goes out into the park across the street, which has streets on all sides. This is downtown Santa Monica. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. And he puts us all in a circle and has us meditate for a second. I'm like, oh, great. It's not what I signed up for, but fine. I'll do it. If you can call down a UFO, why not, right? So he does. He says, all right, I think they're up there now. Look up there. 15 seconds later, this light shoots down. This is downtown Santa Monica. You couldn't see a single star in the sky. And he pointed to where this thing was going to appear, and it looked like a shooting star. So it was a little bit ambiguous. But it was also weird, because he pointed towards it and said it was going to appear, and it did. And I looked it up. There was no meteor shower, no. So that was kind of the first, but they started snowballing after that. I'll tell you another really cool one. It was about 1992. Late July, and I'm driving home from my brother's house and my sister-in-law, because they were helping me through all this. She was kind of the Scully to my Mulder, if you know what I mean. She illustrates all the work, and my sister-in-law has been working really closely with me on all of this. And I was going out of my mind trying to just absorb this, and finally decided it was late, had to go home. I lived just a few miles away, so I'm driving through Woodland Hills, densely populated area, but it's late at night, coming around this hairpin corner at about 2 miles an hour, because it's a very tight corner, and this ball of light drops down out of the sky. Couldn't believe it. I thought it was a bird swooping towards my car at first, until I saw that it was, a glowing round ball of light, about as big as, a little bit bigger than a golf ball. This thing just comes right up in front of my windshield. No kidding. Goes back and forth 2 or 3 times. It wasn't a reflection. I mean, there's no way. I saw this thing. And then it goes down below the hood of my car and shoots straight up. So yeah, I've seen, I don't know what that was.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, whenever when I saw my sighting, it was just, it looked like three orange flames just shooting up into the sky in a triangular formation. But it looked like, you know, not like flares, not like anything I've ever seen, and they were going just straight up in this, you know, perfectly triangular formation. And all of a sudden it just took off and disappeared. That was my, you know, first sighting, and what preceded was a very interesting contact experience. But that's for a whole different show. I've already discussed that with the audience. But yeah, it was very fascinating. I'd like to talk about some of the cases, some of like the most profound cases for you, even going back in history to some of the earliest documented ones. What's one that comes to your mind?
Well, you know, I am a big fan of the famous cases, the early ones, you know, following Betty and Barney Hill. Of course, they were the breakthrough case here in the U.S., and Antonio Villas-Boas was the first one that got a lot of publicity. But I really like the case of like Sergeant Charles Moody, who had an incredible experience. He's a good witness, military guy, trained observer, and is going out to see meteors. When this light drops out of the sky and it's getting lower, and boom, it's a craft and it's on the road in front of him. And he's taken on board by, you know, not grays as we would think of them, more human looking, very human looking. And they took him on board, and it was largely friendly. They said that they've got bases, that they would contact him again. I'm not sure if they ever did. If they did, he hasn't said so. But yeah, they showed him the engine room. That's something I hear quite a bit. It's a good early case, and I like the early cases because, you know, they're not polluted by all the cultural saturation that we've had on this subject.
What are some maybe some other possible earlier cases that really stick out for you? Maybe some that are lesser known to you know, mainstream ufology.
Well, I like the case involving Sandra Larson, Elaine Thomas, and I forget the other one's name, Louise Smith. Yeah, that's it. Louise Smith, Elaine Thomas, and three ladies driving through, I believe it was Kentucky. Had a very scary experience with UFO hovered over them and pulled their car up into the sky. And what I like about this case is all three ladies were interviewed, and there's physical evidence. They came back with burns actually on their face and neck. There was some hair loss, headaches, nausea. One of their rings was missing. They were deeply traumatized. They ended up going under hypnosis. I think it was with Leo Sprinkle, actually who was the first guy to do this, regressive hypnosis to recover memories. And boy, they recalled a harrowing experience. It was pretty scary. It's an early case with good physical evidence. And people say, oh, you know, governments are my labs. I doubt it, because there are far too many cases. One case I interviewed was just this little kid. He's delivering newspapers in a small town in Texas in the early 1950s. He's like 11 years old. And this light, this glowing object comes shooting out of the sky and hovers above him and sends down a beam of light. And next thing he knows, it's daylight. You know, he had been delivering papers early, you know, 4 a.m. And now it's, you know, it's 6 a.m. and it's light. And he's still got all his papers to deliver. This object is gone. He's had missing time. And he, you know, delivers all the papers as quick as he can and gets home and is just exhausted. Well, from that day, he was not only exhausted, he got very sick. He was so tired he could not get out of bed. Had to be excused from all his activities. They sent him to the hospital. They gave him a bunch of vitamins. They did not know what was wrong. He knew it was because he had been beamed by this object, but he didn't know what it was. You know, he hadn't even heard of UFOs. So that's another interesting case where I know the military is not doing this because this guy hasn't told anybody. He was just a little 11-year-old kid from Texas out of a tiny little town. why would the military do that? It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Now, I was going to ask you, since you brought up my labs or military abductions, do you think that there is a percentage of these cases that could be the military just either doing experiments or actually possibly working with extraterrestrials? What do you think is going on with military abductions?
I would say yes to both of those. I think there is a percentage. I don't think it's super large, because something like this would take a lot of people to do on a widespread scale, and I'm not sure how many people are in the military who are trained to do this sort of thing or could even handle it. But yes, I'm absolutely convinced people are abducted by our military, and in some cases think it's aliens. But I think equally common, and like one lady I interviewed, Melinda Leslie, she's pretty well known in this field. She certainly does a lot of shows, and I wrote a chapter about her in one of my books. She had an abduction experience with two of her friends here outside of LA, driving through the national forest, and had missing time. She recalled it naturally afterwards. Her friends did to a certain degree, but they all went under hypnosis and called everything. She remembers seeing a guy, a colonel, a human-looking guy in a full military outfit on board the UFO, observing the whole thing take place. And I had read a similar case like that in an early UFO magazine, and there are other cases like that. Also common is, people will have an abduction experience, and then the military shows up and says, "What happened?" And it will abduct you and give you shots of sodium pentothal and question you. And a number of abductees have told me, yeah, I've been abducted, but I fear the military more because they come afterwards and are not nearly as nice.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Most accounts that I hear from military abduction are more malevolent, or more, terrifying in nature than what some people would consider more of the real off-planet or interdimensional contact experiences. Is that what you would agree?
Yeah, I think this is a widespread phenomena. I think it's much more widespread than people realize. We're talking 1 in 40, 1 in 50. The reason I say that is because this was a quote I heard from J. Allen Hynek, who was in a position to know these things. And I thought, no way. 1 in 40 people abducted. That means I would know somebody who's abducted. So I had read that quote early on in my research, and that's why I decided I'm going to ask everyone I know. And I did not have to ask 40 people. I thought, okay, it could be higher than that. And so I started surveying the literature and other researchers. I ended up writing an article for the MUFON Journal called 1 in 40, which took quotes from Jacques Vallée and Antonio Hunes, Bud Hopkins, and all the major researchers, John Mack, and these guys, kind of building a case that this was a pretty common phenomenon, an epidemic certainly, as we would think of it. And it was about a year later the Roper poll came out, which is a polling organization, and they did a poll on UFOs. Have you been abducted? And there was all these kind of questions inserted into this questionnaire, like, have you seen a UFO close up, missing time, balls of light, scars on your body, things like this. Markers, we call them. And they found 1 in 50 people have the markers of a UFO abduction. So yeah, it's widespread. It's mostly ETs. And I'm very encouraged ultimately about it. Yeah, it can be very scary. But I don't think their intention is to scare people or hurt people.
When it comes to the genuine phenomenon that could be considered real, off-planet or extraterrestrial, interdimensional, whatever these things are, do you think that most of the accounts you've heard are more of a benevolent in nature, more of positive experience than negative, or does it kind of weigh itself out equal?
There's a certain amount of equal weight there. We do see a bell curve, certainly, of some people who are like, I'm not happy. How dare you say ETs are friends? This is what happened. And they have a painful, scary experience where they're treated unkindly, certainly. And it can be very painful. I know a guy interviewed in England, he calls the Greys the tossers. He does not like them. He was abducted and had his head injected, and it was very painful, and they didn't care. So he's kind of fought with them. He punched one in the face at one point, literally. Not the only guy I've talked to who's done this. So yeah, they're not all puppies and rainbows by any means. But that said, I mean, I think it is largely benevolent. And I think we are dealing with ETs in the classic sense in most of these cases, who probably do have the ability to time travel or move interdimensionally. But yeah, the reason I say I think it's mostly benevolent is because 3 main reasons. Well, I mean, actually a number of reasons. But people, yeah, they're taken on board and physically examined and undressed and kidnapped in the night. That's horrific, and I cannot rationalize that. I can't. That's a problem. And I don't know what to say about that being benevolent, because it's not. So I initially thought UFOs were like floating torture chambers. But when I looked at what actually happens to people, they're physically examined, right? I've got 300 cases of people who've been healed, documented. I wrote a book about it. People are taken into the control room, and they're shown how the craft works. The ETs tell them, like, this is how we build it. This is how we run our craft. That's not uncommon. Very common when anyone gets a message beyond, you know, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you. And if they're not screaming in terror, you know, they're treated differently. And yeah, taken into control, but also given warnings. This is super common. Doesn't matter what type of ET, honestly, praying mantis, gray, human looking, or what era, really. This has been going on from the early 50s onwards. It's the same darn message of nuclear proliferation, environmental destruction, pollution, war and aggression. So these are positive things. And thirdly, people come away from their experiences, and this is very strong, all interested in healing. They do Reiki now, or they do channeling, or environmentalism, or water dowsing, or some alternative thing. They become human rights activists. So this is all very encouraging, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that last part, because for me personally, my experience was a very positive experience, and the information that I've given was so similar to what you said. You know, that how we have to take care of our future of this planet, and there's, you know, dangers coming in our future. We just have to you know, be guardians of our planet. And I have changed a lot of aspects of my life spiritually and in a lot of ways after my experience. So yeah, for me, definitely it was a positive. I know there are plenty of people that have, you know, experiences with malevolent gray type beings or reptilian beings. Do you find that there is some sort of hierarchy of these more negative beings? Like you always hear that the reptilians are usually in control of something, or these praying mantis beings or something like that.
Yeah, I wonder about it. You know, when it comes to ETs, what I don't see is like graphic accounts of sadism where they are intentionally trying to hurt people. Even with reptilians, I don't get a lot of reptilian reports, I have to be totally honest. And a couple I have had were not friendly. People felt like they were, you know, ready to eat them, literally. I don't know if that's true, but I've certainly heard enough people say it that I have to wonder. As far as hierarchy, it's very strange and very hard to figure out, because there does seem to be a hierarchy. It's like those little tiny grays, the emotionless 3-foot tall ones that march like robots, are probably android robots, as we would think of them, and are being ordered around by certainly the taller grays. And also we do see grays and human-looking ETs, and for that matter, praying mantis working together in a number of cases. It seems like in some cases praying mantis ones are in charge, but we don't know. There's one case, this is so interesting to me. Constance Clear, she was a researcher from the Midwest and had a case from a guy in Texas who she called Andrew, who was taken on board, and it was grays, and it was a pretty horrific series of experiences he had of being physically examined and operated on, and he wasn't happy. And he had this abduction, and the lady, I think her name was Nelda or something, the gray, said, "Aren't you happy? We've finished our experiments with you. We've got what we need from you. Aren't you happy?" And he said, no, I'm mad as hell. And she said, "What's mad? What's hell?" And so he explained. He's like, yeah, well, I'm angry because, you know, you really scared the living daylights out of me, and it was painful, and you didn't tell me what was going on, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, we do have a lot of problems with human emotions. But she told him something else, which kind of blew my mind and speaks to this sort of hierarchy. She said, you know, I'm the section commander on the ship. I pilot the ship. I'm the commander, and I'm one of few females who have reached that rank. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, so Greys have sexual discrimination in their society.
Very interesting.
Right?
Yeah. Now, when it comes to military interaction with UFOs, it seems like in the past, you know, the 50s, maybe 60s, you used to hear about more of aggressive interaction, like we would actually fire on UFOs. And I haven't heard that in such a long time. Is this something you find in your research, that we used to actually, you know, fire on these unidentified flying objects?
Yeah, I believe that was a policy early on, because these flying, what happened was historically unprecedented for humanity. Yes, we know UFOs have been around forever because of, you know, petroglyphs and hieroglyphics and Middle Age wood carvings, Renaissance paintings. I could go on. We know they've been here, and you know, even some waves of sightings and things like this, but nothing like what happened in 1947 onward. From the Roswell crash and Kenneth Arnold and the atomic age, something happened. And we're pretty sure it's the atomics. This is what the ETs have said, and this is what a lot of researchers have certainly commented on. So we're dealing with this huge super wave, and they came and started mapping all our military bases. Seriously, we're hovering over our Air Force bases, our dams, our electric power plants. From a military perspective, that has got to scare the living daylights out of you, to have these things flying around and you can't control them. So yeah, I think in the beginning we reacted badly, but understandably. And
But it didn't really go too well for us, did it?
No, it didn't. And that's after losing a bunch of pilots. This is according to, you know, Donald Kehoe, Frank Edwards, some of these really great early researchers who blew the lid off this. Thank God for them. Because there's a very active cover-up, still is, and it was vicious and ruthless, and paid for with our tax dollars, and an absolute mistake to make. This should have gone public from the beginning. Too bad that Roswell memo didn't stay public, because that would have changed everything. That's how we should have done it, but to make UFO witnesses look like liars, drug users, you know, crazy, is with your own tax dollars is really bungling it badly, because now they've lost a lot of credibility, because we know UFOs are real. They're not going away. And this is why we're seeing, I think, disclosure, and why, you know, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And I think we found it advantageous long ago to stop shooting at these things. That was not going to work.
Well, you mentioned there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and there is a lot going on right now, especially the past few months, in the past couple of years, more and more mention of UFOs in the mainstream media. Now we have Pentagon releasing information, talk of possible exotic off-planet materials that they may be discussing, all kinds of things that are coming out right now. Do you think it's just because they know they can't keep a lid on it anymore, or they know something may happen? What are your thoughts on why they're actually talking about this?
I think those are the two main drivers, honestly. They can't keep a lid on it. There are far too many whistleblowers, and it's what we call an open conspiracy. Most people believe our government is hiding UFO information. Most people believe in UFOs. So our government has reached a point where they have lost credibility if they continue to deny the presence of UFOs and their knowledge of it. So while they obviously are not being fully transparent or forthcoming, or truthful even, they have to disclose. They have to, or they will lose control of the situation. And they are. No, another country might move forward quicker than us on this, but someone's got to move forward. And I think that's one of the main drivers, is so many people know it's true, but another is what's going on behind the scenes. And by that, I think there is a very strong push on the part of the ETs And again, I think most of what we're dealing with are ETs in the classic sense, biological beings from other planets. And I say that because they appear on radar. They look metallic. They're hovering over our metal mines. I did a study of that. Why would they be interested in our mines if they're not interested in the metal? They're landing at these mines. They're affecting these mines. There's humanoids seen. That to me speaks of these being, people like us and the way they're thinking, what they're doing. And if the crash retrieval accounts are true, well, all bets are off. We know then that these are craft and these are aliens because we've got the bodies, we've got the craft. What more do you need? The idea of aliens is so logical, it's almost inescapable. Because if they're not real, what are we? We cannot be the center of the universe. Those theories have never worked out. And that's what the second most popular theory is. It's like some intelligence that's manipulating humanity. And yeah, I think some cases are that. I think there are spirits, jinn, intelligences, able to put on different masks, interdimensional things.
That's what I was going to go into is they have, what I personally experienced was a more of a consciousness state, interdimensional, what it seemed to me. But the beings I encountered seemed that they may have been able to project themselves through consciousness into this etheric state. And I think that these beings are so advanced, it could be, something so far beyond anything that we could understand. But I think there could be a mix of both, that there could be a mix of these interdimensional or spirit-like beings, and then there's these physical ones that could actually be coming from galaxies far away. But it's very fascinating that these beings could exist, right beyond the spectrum of our vision at all times.
Yeah, I wrote a book about onboard UFO encounters. It's called 15 True Cases. I'm going to say about 13 think it's aliens, but one guy, no, let me see, 12. One guy's pretty darn sure they're angels in the classic sense. Another guy's pretty darn sure they're demons, which I looked into, by the way, demonic spirits. I don't think that's it. I think that's a true phenomena, but it's a vicious, malevolent haunting by these really nasty, apparently non-human spirits. One guy thinks it's something else. It's this phenomenon, very much like Jacques Vallée talks about, or John Keel, Lauren Coleman, Jerome Clark, I think some of this is. But this speaks towards, why our government is being forced to disclose, because they're doing, so much. It's so much beyond just what UFOs and crash retrieval stories. There's interactions with these guys. There's apparently a space force going on doing all kinds of stuff that we're not being told about. I find the testimony of Gary McKinnon. You might remember him, that whistleblower from England.
Yes.
That's crazy. And Bob Lazar, I was pretty convinced by his case early on because he wasn't the only one. There's a lot of whistleblowers coming out. So there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes that's just so extra, so beyond that people are going to go out of their minds when they find this to be true.
One of the most profound, pieces of evidence for me is when you have a mass abduction where multiple people experience this at the same time or actually brought on aboard a ship at the same time. Are there any cases that you've researched where there's a mass abduction, multiple people witness it at the same time?
Yeah, I think that probably happens more often than we think. I've looked at, and that would be a great study project. Giving me a good idea here, because all these cases are flooding into my head, and I don't think it's been really thoroughly researched how widespread mass abductions are. I know there was a case in Houston with Daryl Sims, had a bunch of people abducted on the same night. The Brooklyn Bridge abduction with Linda Cortile was the pseudonym used. I think it's Napolitano was her real name. She eventually went public. That was apparently a mass abduction, because it was a bunch of people who reported abductions on that night. I know Whitley Strieber reported being taken on board a UFO and saw rows and rows of soldiers. So that's apparently, there's a lot of cases like this. I know of another case, a lady in, I think it was New York, it's 20 or 30 women being held. including herself. I did a case in Coronado Island, Southern California, where there was 8 people abducted on the same night. Yvonne Smith also, she actually spearheaded the investigation. We both wrote books about it. It's a crazy case where, yeah, multiple people were abducted on the same night from the same place.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that particular case?
Yeah, I was actually there. This is a crazy case. This took place at the Triad UFO conference on that weekend on Coronado Island. Coronado Island is the last place you would think a UFO would want to come because it's a Navy island. This is where the Navy SEALs train. It's very heavily populated. It's very heavily militarized. Lots of police. You don't speed in that town. You will get a ticket. I mean, it's seriously crowded. It's a tourist trap, too. So it's just thick with people from end to end. And these 6 people who knew each other were all staying in the same hotel, the Village Inn. I was staying at a friend's house a few blocks away. And one of them, Mike Evans, the guy who initially broke the case, woke up in the middle of the night because this light was shining into his room. And next thing he knows, he hits his lip on the sink, he thought, and he wakes up the next morning and there's this huge spot of blood on his pillow. And his wife's like, honey, it's not your lip. Your lip is fine. I think it's your ear. And he felt really bad that morning. And the people in the next room, one of them full on remembered Grace coming in and taking her roommate. And the next room, he had partial memories. And suddenly he just doesn't want to go to the conference. And Mike ends up going home with no memory of being abducted, but starts waking up with these horrible bruises on his arm and realizes he is being abducted and goes under hypnosis and recalls being taken on board a UFO and implanted by gray aliens. So this case started snowballing from there. There turned out there was some abductees in another hotel who were abducted. And another abductee, also attending the conference, had an experience on that night. I don't remember anything happening to me, but this is not the first conference I've been to that's had weird things happen.
Another piece of evidence that is probably one of the most compelling is, implants. But it seems that there's many cases where the abductee would go to a medical doctor to have the implant looked at or removed, and somehow the x-rays would disappear or the actual material would disappear. A lot of strange phenomenon surrounding that. Do we have any good evidence of implants that we can actually look at and see that it's, strange exotic material?
There's been some significant steps taken toward this, absolutely. I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of convincing skeptics, but Dr. Roger Lear did some 20, 30 cases of implant removals and found very unusual properties. And it was, no foreign body reaction. That was weird. Usually there was a calcium deposit. Some of these things looked like they were made up of meteoritic iron. A lot of them looked completely identical. Some were magnetic. One was actually giving off signals, electromagnetic signals. They would move around. They sent them off for analysis, and there were some very unusual properties. Like being composed of what appeared to be meteoritic iron.
Yeah, and wasn't one of his studies that these objects would actually grow this material around a portion of the cell that it would be that'd be planted in, right?
Yeah, numerous very unusual properties, and he's really the go-to guy. And it's unfortunate he passed away because no one's really picked up the torch here. But there are other cases. I run across this all the time. People I interview say, "Oh yeah, I went to the dentist. I went to the doctor. I was having trouble," and the doctor's like, "Well, you've had surgery on your nose." No. Well, did you poke a pencil up your nose at some point? And they're like, "No." And like, "Oh well, he had this strange metallic object." Talked to a lot of people who've had it happen. One lady, she sent me X-rays. She was freaking out because she takes her son to the dentist, which she does regularly, every other year, and suddenly there's this giant marble under his back molar. And she finally found me after a long search of trying to figure out what this might be. And I'm like, well, if you're talking to me, we both know what you think it is. And, and so I sent this x-ray to some doctors, and they're like, well, it's a foreign body, obviously. Did they shoot themselves in the mouth with a BB gun? Which is what everyone always says when they see this x-ray. And I'm like, no, they didn't. They would remember that, which is what they told me, what they told the original dentist. And this thing, yeah, it's big. There's no entry wound. And I was interviewing them. I'm like, have you seen a UFO? And she's like, no, I haven't. Have you? Her son was too shy to talk to me. He's a teenager. And he's like, no. And then he admitted he had. And I'm like, well, all right, what happened? It turned out one had come low over his car with his friend. And so they had a hard time with it, and finally called me up right after the Grays came and visited them and said, don't worry, everything's fine. So after that, she calmed down quite a bit. But they would go back to the dentist and take x-rays, and it's still there. One time it did disappear. They took a set of 3 x-rays. It was there. 30 seconds later, it was gone. 30 seconds later, it was there again. That was weird. I've got the x-rays that show this. I mean, I don't know how to explain that other than we've heard this before. I think they did it on purpose. I feel like they did it on purpose. Because it's so coincidental that would happen while the x-ray is being taken.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with ufology and everything that's happening right now, we do live in fascinating times, although I never will trust the government or anything they come out with, but it is very interesting that they are releasing this information and that this is coming out right now, so we're just going to have to take it as it comes. I do want to get into a little bit something different for the next half of the show. I know that you have actually applied yourself and done astral travel, which is very fascinating to me, that you can actually, your consciousness can, I guess, actually leave your body and go to different altered states of being, or possibly even different dimensions if you want to look at it that way. Could you tell us a little bit more about what astral travel is and how you got started doing it?
Yeah, I'm so glad I love talking about the subject. Kind of came along the same time as the UFO thing, but through a different pathway. Really, it was a big tragedy in my life. My mother died at a pretty young age, 49. It was very unexpected, and being a complete skeptic of all things paranormal, I was destroyed. I was devastated, and started having these weird dreams where she'd come into my room at night, and I would swear I was awake, and then I would wake up for real. So it was a little confusing at first, and I knew on some level that I had been visited by her, but I couldn't reconcile it with the fact that I knew that there was no such thing as life after death. And I even saw her ghost. I'm like, no, I'm not even looking. No. So it was a difficult adjustment at first, but I got interested in dreams and heard about lucid dreaming. I thought, well, this sounds interesting. And I started reading the works of Stephen LaBerge, and found his work fascinating, that you can wake up in the dream state, but couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I was doing the exercises until I came across Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, which explains how to go out of the body, and tells his own adventures. And it was a great book, and very lucid and very clear. And I thought, okay, let's try this. It sounds a little scary, but I'm willing to try. I'm not sure if I totally believe in it, but it was a pretty convincing book. And so I did the exercises, which are relaxation exercises, affirmations, visualizations, things like this. And darned if it didn't work. I started having a lot more dream recall, started getting pre-lucid and lucid episodes. And it was maybe 2 months in, a month or two, I woke up one night standing next to my bed. And I looked down, and I'm like, oh, I'm lying in bed. What's going on? It took me just a split second to realize that I was actually out of body. Got this cold chill. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. I've died. I've gone and died. And I was, I know it sounds funny, but I was upset. I dived it back in, scared out of my mind. Yeah, it was But I was so happy when I woke up. I'm like, oh, man, this is true. And all it takes is that one for you to know, that first one. Well, kind of. I still couldn't believe it. But I got real into it a couple of weeks later. Popped out. I'd actually just laid down one afternoon, just plopped down, suddenly felt what we call the vibratory state, the vibrational state. It's when you get so physically relaxed, your body starts to actually vibrate. And I think it's coming into tune with the astral plane is what's happening. But
now, would you consider out-of-body experiences and astral travel the same, or is there a difference?
No, I think it's the same thing. They're just different terms. I think lucid dreaming is very much related and usually takes place in what I would call the astral state because you can, leave the physical world and go to the other side and you start creating whatever you want. Thought rules on the, some of the higher astral planes. And that's where we do a lot of our lucid dreaming, I think.
Do you think that these planes that we're visiting during astral travel are actual planes of real existence where external consciousness could exist or external beings could actually exist?
Yeah, sort of like a consensus reality. In essence, we're all hallucinating, and the world is made up of consciousness, and this comes really clear when you start visiting the higher planes, I guess you'd call them. But yeah, for me, how it kind of rolled out was started just having 1 or 2 second out-of-body experiences. It took me a while to learn how to stay conscious. I got so excited, I just had to go and just relax for a second, and till I could extend it to like a minute even. And then I had to learn how to see and move, and all of this was a steep learning curve. It took a year of really, really working at it. But it was you discover another world. This is the best thing that could ever happen to anybody. And you've got to try it. And so initially I'm like, oh, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? What's going on? Eventually, this is kind of something you obsess with. And you find a way to prove it to yourself. I tried appearing in front of people, moving objects. I couldn't do any of that, though I know other people have. I've talked to them. I've read it in books, but I wasn't able to do that. But I did visit a place out of body. And I'm like, all right, I've never been here physically. I'm going there as soon as I wake up. That's my plan. I went straight back to my house, and that's exactly what I did.
Tell us about that. What place did you see, and what place did you get to go visit?
Yeah, I lived in Canoga Park at that time in a 3-story condo, and made it out of body, and it's always so exciting when you do. You're like, I did it! Oh my God! What am I going to do now? And it's just always incredible. And I popped up through the roof. I'm like, find proof. I think I was just flying around. Actually, that's right. I was just flying around. That was kind of my goal, but I'd forgot. So you really want to focus, and when you do this stuff, because if you have intent and goal, you'll be much more successful. So I'm just flying around like an idiot, really. When I'm traveling down the LA River, not far from my house, and I swooped down under this bridge, and I was shocked at what I saw. This is a cement river, but it was filled with soil on the bottom, and litter and Coke cans. I thought, well, that's, because sometimes you project little hallucinations into your experience. You can project people, or you'll run out into your room and things are there that are not there in real life. And I thought, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm projecting. But I wonder. And so I decided I'm going to fly back and see if this is real. And I go back and wake up. And I usually do this in early morning, or did, because this was one of an earlier experience. And it worked best in early morning for me. And I have my coffee, and I'm like, well, I'm going to get out and drive. Not normally what I do. Just drive to some place. And I went there, and darned if it wasn't right. And I'm like, whoa! To see a place out, physically that you first saw out of body is an incredible thrill. And I'm not talking like a friend's house, because you already know that, which I would do too. But at some point you get pulled to the other side, because that's where all the fun is. And yeah, originally my point I'm finally getting to is there's this the heavenly realms, I guess you would call it. I'm not religious, really, not really at all, but so beautiful and it's sparkling, and it's very nature and flowers and trees and parks and roads, and it's always the same. And this is where I would meet people who, that's where I eventually met my mother, who died, and other people who have passed away, pets, relatives, friends. And that is a real place, I think. And so cool. I mean, it's the
Now,
best.
how long did it take you to actually reach to where you could actually go to these, like you said, heavenly realms? And when was the first time you've experienced that? How did you do that?
Yeah, it wasn't instantaneously. I'll tell you that. I was stuck on Earth for a while, I guess you would call it. And it's weird because you feel like a ghost, seriously, especially when you go to some place and you see living people and you're like, oh my God, I'm out of body and I'm walking in front of people. And you're like, hey. It's a weird feeling. And occasionally I get very emotional because you feel sometimes like profound loneliness or real excitement or like fear. And that can pull you right back in your body.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, I would think for myself, if that would happen to me, I'd be so afraid of not being able to go back to my body. But it's like you automatically go anyway.
Yeah, the trick is staying out. You trust me, you'll have no problem getting back in. The slightest thought of your body will pull you back in. You can wiggle your toe or open, because unpleasant things have happened to me, or a little scary. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going. Because I started doing experiments. Once I got good at it, and I'd read these books. There's lots of books on this. I'm like, oh, you can visit your past lives. You can rescue lost souls. You can meet your spirit guides. You can visit the Akashic Library. Go to a healing temple. These are all things I'm like, wow, say your name while out of body. Something's supposed to happen. So what I started doing once I could stay out for more than a few seconds is try to get to the other side. And people say, oh, this is dangerous. It's dangerous. You could get possessed and all this stuff. You could get lost out of your body. You could get attacked. And I'm like, I wonder if that's true. Because I've been doing this for a while before I started to read this. And I couldn't find a single account, not one, someone actually hurt in some vicious way. The worst you get is some people, malevolent spirits will antagonize you.
It's very interesting. Speaking of, any malevolent experiences or bad experiences, could you tell us about any that you've had that you consider more of a negative experience?
Yeah, I haven't had a lot. I usually pop the other side and have fun. I mean, one time, because when you're early on, you're very emotional with this, and you're very much a kid. And I would create feasts of food. Brownies and chicken and sour cream and onion potato chips and Neapolitan ice cream. And I would eat like nobody's business because you can. And I mean, to get a little bit graphic, you can, sex too, whatever you want. That's a strong component. Robert Monroe talked about that. A lot of the out-of-body researchers, because you'll get hit by waves of desire and lust and anger and greed and all these emotions come over you, and you have to deal with it. So that can be a little overwhelming. I think if someone's very fear-based, they're going to this is a great place to work out your problems. The worst I've had, a couple of weird things. One time, I wasn't scared on this one, but I thought it was weird. I'm trying to get to the other side, and how I do that would be just flying upwards as fast as I can at supersonic speeds, keep the intent to get to the other side. And you hit this barrier and you pop through. It's really weird. You can actually physically feel it almost. And I'm trying to do that, and sometimes you get this foggy place, and it's like big, just realms of fog going on for 1,000,000 miles. Looks almost cliche, like above an airplane, kind of, but dark skies and just fogs and mist. It's this weird transition place that sometimes I find myself in, and found myself in there, and I'm getting slowed down. I felt something grabbing my ankle, and it had 2 fingers on each side, and it didn't feel human. I'm like, ew, what's that? And so I reach down and I feel it, and it's got these weird knobby fingers, and I peel one off and then the other, and it's, I had to physically pull this thing off, and then I started speeding up again. That was weird. One scary thing that did happen once I popped out of body, and I'm like, yay, I did it. And I'm walking around my bed, and I come out into the living room, and I'm trying to focus because it's a heady experience, if you know what I mean. It's a real rush of energy. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Can't believe this is happening again. I'm doing it. And so I'm like, all right, let's go outside, because it's always fun to explore. I mean, just keep moving, keep moving. It's one of the ways I'm able to stay conscious. And I pushed through the door. You can feel it. It's really cool. And I saw these people on the street. And sometimes you see people, sometimes you don't. And sometimes you question whether they're real or not. Because, as I say, you can create projections. You can hallucinate much more easily on the other side than here. But you can instantly tell when it's a real person because they have a presence that is just qualitative, I guess, is the best way of putting it. You just know. And these three guys are young, angry hoodlums. I mean, they were not nice guys. And they looked like murderers, I guess. They wanted to do me harm. I could see it. And they see me, we lock eyes, and these guys come straight for me. And they can move. They're moving, you don't walk on the astral plane. These guys were zooming towards me. I mean, you can walk, but you usually fly. And these guys knew how to do it. And so I kind of knew these guys were experienced ghosts. And I just made that was enough. You're supposed to, I read the books, project love, and you'll be protected and you'll teach. I'm like, no, I'm leaving. Went right back into my body.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Another time I'm like, show me a past life, because that's awesome when you do that. But what always happens is you're taken to the most emotional scene, and it's often the death scene, how you died, because you carry trauma, which can cause health problems and phobias and all these things, and it's great because you can release that. And I called for a past life, and this TV screen comes sweeping over me, boom, and I'm this woman who's about to get raped and killed. And I'm like, no, because I suddenly remembered it happening, even though I was about to experience it all. I remembered it, and I'm like, no, this is enough. Now I know. And that's the one where I did, is start opening and closing my eyes and wiggling my toes and take me back. And yeah.
Oh, that seems like that could be pretty traumatic if you're asking to see that and you see something like that. Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but it's cool too, because you're safe. You're out of body. That's something you should know. You're safe. It took me a year to fly through the telephone wires. I would always fly around them. I'm like, you know what? Why am I doing this? Just fly through them, see what happens. And I did, and went zzz, it lit up for a second. I'm like, whoa, and it never lit up after that. So. But yeah, it can be a little traumatic. I died in the Holocaust. That was scary.
So you've done it after that. You've actually asked for more past life experiences.
Yep. Only one. Yeah, it's usually a death scene. One time it wasn't, and sometimes these come as kind of powerful dreams, which are, in essence, out-of-body experiences. A lot of the time, people recall a flying dream, or when they have valid information in a dream. There's or it's super vivid and you felt like you were somewhere else and you just kind of know you were, or you visit someone. These are kind of clues that this was more than just your average dream, which, is about the movie you had last night, or the movie you saw, or your fears and your desires. Most people's dreams are about fears and desires. So if you want to go out of body, you got to start facing those. Realize your desires, face your fears, get rid of that, because that's taking your attention. So the whole trick is attention and your intention and imagination and desire and focus, and wrapping it all up and saying, I'm going to do this. Yeah, everyone, it's so easy. It's so darn easy.
Now, you mentioned you actually spoke with deceased loved ones and other people that you've seen that have passed. Could you talk a little bit about one of those experiences?
Yeah, that was the best, because the best one ever was talking to my mom. That was kind of my whole focus initially. I'm like, these experiences are all well and good, but where's my mom? And I'd be like, pop out of my body and be like, Mom, 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 and call her over and over again. And there were a few times she came and visited me just spontaneously, but it wasn't working with me initiating it. But finally it did. finally, darned if it did. It was weird because I popped out of body and there was this lady in my condo, and I instantly knew she was real. But and I kind of recognized her, but I could not place her. I had no idea who she was. She's this beautiful black woman. And I'm like, wow, who are you? You know, are you my spirit guide? Because usually I'm alone. I'm like pretty lonely out there. Most of the people who do this have spirit guides are right with them the whole way, but not everybody, or they're not visible. And I was kind of out there on my own most of the time. And she's there, and she smiles at me very lovingly, grabs my shoulders, spins me around, and pushes me on the small of my back, right there in the center, through the wall. And I pop out in this weird place, which I don't recognize. I don't even know. It looks like France or something, a weird cafe. And I'm trying to orient myself in time and place. And I'm like, well, you know, I don't know. And long story short, I end up calling for my mom. I'm like, Mom, are you around? Mom. And I've called her 20 times, and she appears in front of me. And, you know, I'm like, at this point, I'm like 25, 30 years old, 35. I forget, but I had lost a lot of my hair. All my hair was like really luxurious and back. And so was she, you know, looked younger than me. She looked like my sister. I'm like, Mom, you look great. And yeah, she grabs me by the hand and takes me to the other side and on a full-on tour, literally. We just fly over this field. We land in it. We land in there's this river. I'm like, wow. And she's like, yeah, watch this. And leads me into this little river. And we can feel the water, and it's so cool. It doesn't get you wet in the way water does here. But I mean, it does, but you step out of it and you're dry instantly. And it's slightly more subtle, but slightly more energetic. And everything's glowing from within there. Everything's super real. It's hyper real. It's more real than it is here. It's very hard to describe. But now, it's like...
seeing as that you're actually in contact with consciousness or entities, what would you say to those that, you know, are of the mind that you're, you know, interacting with a demonic spirit, or, you know, what if it was a trickster and not really, you know, the spirit of your mother? How would you know? Is there a way you could tell that it was a benevolent or your actual mother?
Yeah. This speaks to, you know, I'm glad I studied demonology, because they always have a flaw. You know, they always exhibit a flaw. There's certain, you know, it's a very, I don't want to say structured, but we know how these demonic ghosts work and how they manifest and what they do. And they are bent on destroying and scaring people. And you can instantly tell if you come across a bad spirit. You can tell. And you know, Ed and Lorraine Warren were kind of one of the pioneers of certainly the American demonology movement. And they used it interchangeably with people, living people who were once human. And I'm not sure that that's accurate, because according to, you know, traditional schooling, these are non-human spirits who have never been human, who are like angels but have chosen the dark side and can manifest in a bunch of different ways. But when you're out of body, you are very psychic. Communication is universally, well, not usually, telepathy. It's a much different world up there, and you can sense things much more easily. In fact, going there, you know, come back and you start having all kinds of psychic experiences. No, it's not demonic. I am sure it's not, because you can tell, you know, by the fruits you shall know them type of thing. You come away absolutely feeling glorious. I called on God once. That was something I wanted to do. I'm like, God, I want to see God. And I was struck by this powerful beam of energy and pulled up out of my condo so fast that I lost consciousness. And I came to sometime later in my bed, and oh man, I could have flown. I felt so good. I was walking on air for days. This is a really wonderful phenomenon. It's something that we all do every night. Actually, most people don't remember it. They remember it in snippets of their dreams. It's our birthright. We will all have a permanent out-of-body experience at some point. We're gonna go to the heavenly realms. And I've been to these lower realms, you know, because there was this lady, Marilyn Hughes, who talks about, you know, hell and the hellish realms. I'm like, well, you know, she's a pretty religious person. I'm not, but I'm interested, you know, and so I'm like, yeah, let's take a look. You know, I'd like to see some of these lower realms. And I got little glimpses of it, of very hellish places. And it wasn't brimstone like with, you know, lakes of fire. I could, or at least I'm not willing to go there. But yeah, places where people are, you know, in a lot of agony. It's a real problem. For example, you know, if you go out of body regularly, at some point you'll probably be taken to heal people or pull them away from Earth, rescue them as a lost soul. And I didn't even realize I was doing this, but I was. But when I finally became aware of it, was when I asked to do it. I'm like, I want to try this. Other people are doing this, let me try. And I made that intention, I popped out, and I was taken to this place. It was underneath a house. And I instantly saw this little girl, little blonde girl, you know, and she was dead, and she didn't know it. She was stuck under this house and had been forever. I had a, you know, kind of an impression of being, you know, raped and killed. So that was hard. And I'm like, oh, you know, let's, what did I say? Do you want to fly? Or, you know, do you want to fly? And she's like pretty scared, because that's something that people like to do. I would come up to them and they'd like to fly. I didn't even realize I was taking them to the other side, but that's what I was doing. And that was my automatic reaction to do it in this case. And I'm like, oh, you know, let's go find your mother. Let's find your mom. Let me take you to your mom. And she's like, okay. And she grabbed my hand, the poor little sweet thing, and we flew upwards to the other side. And I was paying very close attention because I'd read about this. And at some point, they always, you know, let go of your hand, and you can't see where they go because it's, you know, it's the other side. And I don't know. It's a weird phenomena. And I'm like, well, I've been to the other side a million times. I've seen my mom there. I've seen other people, my pet. But nope, she let go of her hand, and boom, she disappeared. I'm like, darn it! But I feel like I got her there.
That's fascinating. So you believe that during astral travels, we can actually rescue so-called damned or lost souls that may be trapped in these realms,
Yes.
that they were trapped after death.
This is a real problem. And if you look into, you know, is there life after death? There's certain proofs we have. Ghosts is one of them. So there's something there. But there's mediums as well. People who have mediumistic talent. There are deathbed visions. There are channeling. And there's astral travel as well. And you can actually talk to these people. And when you go out of body, you'll see that there are a lot of people who are earthbound for whatever reason. And you understand, because you yourself will be like consumed with certain things. I mean, you don't want to leave your home. It's a little scary. Or you want to eat. Or, you know, and people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol are going to have a hard time to pull themselves out of that. And suicide is a real problem. You know, this causes a lot of ghostly activity. The real problem with most people is they never even consider the possibility that they're dead because it feels so real. It's so real. And your thinking can become easily confused on the lower realms. Like here's a good example. My friend, God bless him, Roger, died of alcoholism. We weren't able to stop it from happening, and it just happened. And I thought, all right, you know, I wonder what's going to happen now, because I'm sure I'm going to see him at some point. And it was like 2 weeks later, I just found myself out of body, which is sometimes what happens. Sometimes, you know, I do the whole process of going out consciously, but often, no, I'm just there. And I'm like, whoa, where am I? Because it's pitch black, and it's a low vibration. I'm not feeling great, you know? And there he was, and he was screaming and in agony. And he was like, saw me. And I'm like, oh my God. He says, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm like, Roger, oh my God, there you are. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I'm going to help, you know, if I can, and blah, blah, blah. And it's very brief because I got pulled away. But I thought, wow, my poor friend is in a lower realm of what I would term, you know, the hellish realms. because death by alcoholism is a form of suicide in a way. I mean, I know it's a disease, but we have these self-destructive behaviors. Drug abuse and alcohol, and suicide is a top 10 killer, by the way, in the United States. 10th leading cause of death, a real problem. And I went back and visited him several times. He was better each time. Next time he was on this lower realm again. It was really weird because I don't normally go there. I'm automatically drawn to this certain heavenly level or above, I guess you'd call it. I don't have really the words for it in terms of levels. But this was a lower level for sure. It was dark because you can tell in the upper levels, everything glows from within and it's just great and everything sparkles and you couldn't be in a bad mood if you wanted. I mean, there's no way. It's all filtered out of you. It's heavenly. But this was a lower realm. It's much like Earth on a bad day. Traffic and lines and people screaming and trying to work out their problems. And I saw Roger, and he was behind this border. And, near-death experiences often talk about these borders. And usually you can traverse them as an astral traveler. And I tried to get to his level, and I couldn't. There was a border there, and I couldn't get to him. I'm like, Roger, how are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for all the love bombs, he said. Because I was praying for him after I'd seen him. And this guy up here is this complete a-hole. Tries to, he manifests a car and tries to run me over. And I had to fly up. I'm like, dude, I'm out, you can fly. You can't catch me. What are you trying to do? And landed back in for landing. I'm trying to talk to Roger, and this guy tries to run me over again and does it over and over again until he's chasing me all over the place. And finally, I just had to leave. This guy was a complete, not a nice guy.
Wow, that's very interesting. Now, speaking of different types of entities that you could come into contact, do you think you've ever come into contact with something that may have been off planet or of a different realm, like extraterrestrial possibly?
Maybe. Like one time I called for an alien and I saw one, but I wonder if it was a projection because it looked really weird. It had like a dog face and nothing like I've ever interviewed anybody on. I can't discount it though because I'm like, I want to see an alien, and one appeared. I'm like, well, yeah, that's Marilyn. But I was skeptical. But one time, I'm like, popped out of body and didn't have a real plan. So I'm like, let's just go to the other side. And I'm flying through it, and it's taken a long time. And I'm in this weird cloudy place again. And I'm like, okay, let's go faster, because that's what I usually do. I'm like, let's get to the other side. Now, fast. And I'm speeding up, and suddenly I see this dark spot ahead of me. And as I'm getting closer, it's quickly getting closer. I see it's two dark spots. I'm like, that's weird. And as it's getting closer, I'm like, well, that looks kind of like a head. That looks like eyes. In fact, as I race by it, I see it's a gray alien. And it's like right next to me. And it turns its head and watches me go by with kind of a mild expression of surprise, maybe. And boy, my heart like jumped up in my throat when I realized what I was looking at, because it wasn't until I was like there that I'm like, oh, wow. And it watched me go by, and I'm like, whoa. Dude, that was one time for sure that happened. That's about it, though. I haven't really tried to do that. I do have a couple memories of being astrally on board a UFO once, but I couldn't really say anything happened that I can recall.
Now, there have been accounts of people that have claimed to be healed miraculously through some sort of out-of-body or astral travel. Have you ever experienced anything like this, yourself or anyone else that you know of, where it's a miraculous healing after an out-of-body experience?
Yes, I sure have, and I became very interested in that because a couple of times I was taken to people and they're like, heal them. I'm like, what? Heal them? All right. And I'm like putting my hands on them. I'm in the astral, and I'm assuming they are too. And I'm like, all right, this is interesting. I started surveying the literature. And Marilyn Hughes, she goes out about it all the time. She healed herself of cuts. There was, gosh, I forget all these guys' names. But one guy, I think he had MS, multiple sclerosis, and was able to clear that up or control it, certainly. Robert Monroe was having problems with the pain in his hip, and he recalled a past life experience where he was struck by a spear, and that cured that. And Bruce Moen was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, a chronic liver disease, chronic in some cases, and it wasn't his. Looked like he was going to die from it, and was able to cure himself through out-of-body travel. It turned again to be related to a past life. Past life is so healing, past life recall. So that's connected to this. I was diagnosed with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. And so I'm like, heal me, heal me, heal me. And my hands were pulled up into this energetic field. And I felt this like electric water is what it felt like. And I felt better after that. And I've got that under control. And went to this, another time, because life on Earth is hard, and you get drained of energy. And that's what I love about out-of-body travel. People are like, oh, aren't you tired when you wake up? I'm like, no, you can fly. You could actually, that's the whole connection to human levitation is astral travel. I've never been able to levitate, but I get it, because you feel that way. And one time I'm out of body, I'm like, I read this, there was healing temples. I'm like, that sounds really cool. Let's try that. And I popped out of my body one day, and I'm pretty good at it at this point. I'm like, just admiring the view, because it's so beautiful when you're out of body. Everything glows in this way that is amazing. And I'm like, all right, healing temple. Now I go to the healing temple, because I've learned how to set my intention. I used to say, can I go? Let's go. But no, if you really set your intention, I'm going now. I got pulled into the spiral. Boom, I'm coming through the other side, and I'm coming down over this beautiful field, and there's this dome. I'm like, wow, look at that. I did it. I'm on my way there. And as we're getting closer and closer, I realized this thing is a giant gymnasium-sized thing, like black stone almost, but slightly different. Because this is the other side. Everything glows in a weird way. And I go through the ceiling, and I land on the floor on my back. And the floor has the most amazing thing that's hard to describe, but it was kind of waffled, or like, an apple pie with the strips of dough going crisscross. It was like that. There were these metal bars or ceramic bars or strips with lines on them that were very energetic, and they started moving back and forth crossways, spinning me in this kind of circle and sending healing energy. And I look up at the walls, and there's a technique called metal filigree, like in fences sometimes. And this was a type of filigree in these walls with this divine light shining through them that I will never be able to describe it. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And as I'm looking at it, I'm admiring it. It was just too beautiful for me to sustain. I'm like, I'm not worthy of this. This is impossible. I can't look at this. This is too, I couldn't. It was so beautiful that it actually hurt. It hurt to see this stuff. Man, I guess that's the best I can describe it.
Wow, that's fascinating.
This light. Oh, man, this light. Oh.
Wow. Now, if people are, I'm definitely interested. I'd love to try this myself. Do you have any specific techniques that you could recommend if someone wants to get started doing this?
Yeah. First of all, it's super easy. The only real obstacle is you think you can't do it, or you're scared, or you don't have the time. So there's really no obstacle but yourself. You don't need special. You can do this under the influence of alcohol. I've done that. You don't need to be super holy or anything, though I think probably that might help if you're a good person, and you face your fears, and you're not all obsessed with addictions and lust and anger, because that can be a problem. But absolutely, it's also, people have to realize there's no danger. That's another obstacle. People think, it's scary. No, you're not going to get possessed. You have spirit guides. There's a silver cord. It'll pull you right back. It's something you're doing every night anyway. So there are several methods. And basically, it's an easy 3-step process is how I finally just worked it out to be. Physically relaxing, mentally relaxing, and then doing visualizations and affirmations. It's very simple. It's best done, at night or early in the morning. Give yourself some extra time to sleep. You need to physically relax to the point where you feel one of like 5 or 6 sensations. And you got to get to this point. It can be tough. You have to feel like numbness, heaviness or lightness, tingling, vertigo. Ideally, you want to feel the vibratory state, and you'll know it. It's like you're being electrocuted. You'll feel it, and it can be pretty disconcerting, but you just want to physically relax, and that's where most people trip up because they don't relax. People go to sleep and their teeth are grinding and their fists are clenched and they're tossing and turning. Physically relax to the point where you can't feel your body, but in essence. And at this point, you'll start to hallucinate and you'll start to be in that dream state already. You're just about ready because you want to get to the point where your thoughts start to manifest in colors and voices and things. And this is where you're normally found to the dream state. Don't fall into the dream state. You may have to lie on your back or in your a different position, but you prop your head up maybe, something to where you don't fall asleep, and just watch your thoughts. Separate yourself a little bit from your thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Just let them become images. And once you start to see colors or hear voices, you're ready. And then you just do your exercises. And this is the real exercises that are in most books. Which kind of skip those first two steps. Why people are like, hey, this is hard. Because you got to physically relax and mentally relax. And then you wrap it all together. You take your focus, your desire, your intent, your imagination, and really intend to do this. And you visualize yourself in an elevator, perhaps, going up, or on an escalator, or on the swing set, going back and forth, or on the bow of a boat, going up and down, or holding a balloon as it lifts you upward, or spinning in place like Wonder Woman, or running down a path like the Flash, fast as you can, run. Anything that involves movement. This is a kinetic visualization. So it's more than just seeing. You actually want to feel yourself moving, and it works so well. You can roll out of bed, and that works. What works best, I think, for beginners is running. Just imagine yourself running. And because when you're so relaxed, your brain starts to actually release a chemical that will paralyze your body. You can't move. And it'll pull you right out. Boom. And it works really well. So anything involving movement is one very good method. Another is visualizing a place you know well. Your living room. Your childhood bedroom. A place you love to visit. Any place that you can visualize with clarity. What happens is suddenly you'll be like looking at it and you like start to see flashes of it, and then you see it, and boom, you step into it. It's wild. It's like suddenly it's real. And you've kind of rooted yourself to the vibration of that place. And you bridge yourself to that location. And for beginners, this is what I would definitely recommend, is what I call the love bridge. If you know someone who has died and you love them, concentrate on them. Ask them to visit you. Ask them to take you to the other side. Put their picture up next to your bed and hold it for a few minutes before bed and say, I want to see you. And they will come. And you will have this amazing dream where they contact you, and it's not a dream. It's not a dream at all. And hopefully you'll be fully conscious if you're doing this right. So those are the main methods. But all equally as important, and all that is useless if you don't do this, is remembering your dreams. You have to keep a dream journal. It's pretty much essential, because this is how you recall doing this. You're already doing this. We're all already conscious on the other side. It's funny because I go to my brothers and sisters. I'd be like, we're out of body. You know that, right? And they're like, yeah, I know that. I'm like, really? You do? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, are you going to remember it when you wake up? I'm like, no. I'm like, what? How can you say that? I'm like, well, because we're in the in-between place. I'm like, I'm going to remember. And they wouldn't. They would not remember.
Right. Now, what makes me think that extraterrestrial phenomenon is very connected to this is because of my own personal contact experience. I decided to meditate and kind of lose the fear whenever I had my experience. and I actually made contact with an intelligence that communicated with me. It indicated that it was it said it was an Arcturian guardian angel or guardian. And it basically had a conversation with me. I wouldn't have believed it unless I experienced it myself, but it was all because I reached this meditative state. Like you said, I did feel a vibration, but after that, it was a little different for me. I didn't leave my body because I was still communicating with this entity after I kind of opened my eyes and was still conscious. It was a very strange experience, unlike anything I've ever experienced before.
Wow.
But I think that that is the key to reaching another realm, or even possibly these extraterrestrials. Like in my experience, that it's our consciousness is a doorway to another side. Definitely, I believe.
Yeah, out-of-body experience is all about meditation. I can't emphasize that enough. And meditation will wake you up. It is amazing. And you hear all this talk about chakras. I was a pretty logical, scientific materialist, and so hearing about chakras was like, but then you start to feel them, and like, wow. And I started having all kinds of clairvoyant experiences as a result of this astral travel, because it's all about raising your vibration. And I want to say one thing before I forget this, is the best method for going out of body, and it's the real secret, is to ask yourself or tell yourself each day, am I out of body right now? Could this possibly be a lucid dream right this very second? And ask yourself that every hour. Or you're going to forget, so do it when you go to the bathroom maybe, or do it when you are on your way to work, or something that you do regularly. You have to do this regularly. And if you can do this, 4 or 5 times a day, to say, am I out of body right now? And then look around, see if there's anything weird. Is anything out of order in any way? Because dreams will always have a little, what I call a cue. Something's not quite right. And we rationalize it in the dream state. We're like, it's a bicentennial penny. I don't remember those, whatever. And this sort of thing. Test reality. Do critical thinking. You have to try to fly is a really good method, or throw your pencil up in the air and try to see if it floats, or push your finger through a wall, and if it permeates it, then you'll know. But you have to actually do this in the waking state, because what happens is we fall into our dreams, and they're perfectly real. They're absolutely real. Never even occurs to us to possibly think that it could be a dream, because there's just no way. It's as real as real life. And so you ask this question in the dream state, and it's so funny. It's so shocking, because you'll be like at work, I want to go home, and you're looking at the clock, and you're like, all right, let's do this stupid reality testing, and you throw something up in the air, and it stays there, and you get this incredible revelation as the office dematerializes, and you're actually floating above your bed. And you're like, wow, I'm out of body, and I was at work. So this will happen, and this is the clue to going out of body. This is the best single method. And what will happen is you'll be having this dream, and you'll be like, hey, that person doesn't have blonde hair, or I'm sure my driveway doesn't face that way. Or didn't I sell this shirt long ago? What's going on? Could this be a dream? And you just get this sudden rush of lucidity that sweeps over you. And once you're in a lucid dream, you just fly through a wall or a window, and you can pop out of body. That sometimes works as well. But yeah, that's the best method. And I hope people try this. It changed my life. I have, anyone who dies in my family or that I've loved, I'm like, oh, I'm not as sad anymore. I mean, I am, don't get me wrong, but I'm like, man, I'm going to go visit him, see what's going on. Because it's a real thing. It's absolutely real. And I can't recommend it enough. It will change your life for the better.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Well, Preston, thank you so much for coming on tonight. That was such great information. If people want to find out more about your books and any of the work you're doing, what's the best way they can do so?
Probably contact me through my website. If you just Google my name, it should take you there. The actual address is PrestonDennett.weebly.com. I got all my books there, and yeah, you can contact me through there. If you've just got a question or a story you want to share or a comment, I love trying to teach people how to go out of body. So I don't know, counseling is the best word, but certainly teaching, I guess. Yeah, teaching people how to do it. I've taught workshops successfully. I've taught some of my siblings how to do this. So it's really cool. Definitely contact me. I'd love if people at least try it. Just try it. If I'm wrong, that's fine. But I think you're missing out if you don't try it.
Right. That's fascinating. Well, Preston, thank you so much again for coming on, and I'd love to talk to you again in the future.
Hey, you got it. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.